The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. Really good stories on today's bonus show. One of them, we talked about Bill Cosby on the regular show today. Tom Brokaw has also been the recipient of allegations that he was involved in sexual harassment of another woman. And he now is railing against the accuser, saying that the individual in question is a character assassin with a grudge against NBC News, that her criticisms of Tom Brokaw have been unsubstantiated, that they are coming 20 years after he opened the door to her and a new job at Fox News. And he generally is saying that this is a character assassination, that he did not harass her in the early 1990s. She claimed, I was groped and assaulted by Tom Brokaw, then the anchor of NBC News. And this is now a sort of reinvigoration of the accused in fighting back. And I think that ultimately there is going to be some kind of equilibrium reached here. And by that, I don't mean in terms of verifying the truth of individual claims. I think that we had Bill Cosby and Harvey Weinstein. Who else were the early ones in the Me Too movement?
Oh, man.
I always think of Cosby and Weinstein, but
yeah,
I mean, the Kevin Spacey thing happened early, although it was a little bit different.
Matt Lauer was towards the end. But
yeah,
that was
later. Charlie Rose kind of later on, who we'll be talking about, by the way. And we had a torrent of allegations. And then we've started to see now a little bit of not so much pushback, but sort of the categorizing of allegations, the idea that, for example, what happened with Aziz Ansari was not the same. Nobody was defending it that I saw, but it was not the same as what Harvey Weinstein was accused of or what Charlie Rose was accused of, whatever, right? The idea that this is a really powerful movement and we need to empower victims to come forward, but at the same time, we as rational humans can sort of categorize some of these incidents and not say everything is the same. Tom Brokaw, I think, is part of that, right? Yeah. And I don't know the truth of this particular matter. I'm not trying to adjudicate it. There are allegations and there's a defense here. But I do think that over time, if there's any... So in the short and medium term, the benefit of the Me Too movement is, hopefully, the empowerment of women to speak out, or any victims, but disproportionately women, to speak out against people that committed these acts against them. Number two, the hopeful response from workplaces to curb this type of thing in the future. I'm hopeful that the long-term impact of this will be sort of a better understanding of how, as a society, we should have a relationship to this type of behavior in a way that is both protective of victims, but also not unduly punitive, which, to be clear, I'm not saying is the case. Like, I'm not in the camp who says a ton of people's careers are incorrectly ruined by this. We want to make sure that nobody's career is incorrectly ruined by this, and I don't think that that's really a major problem right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's always tough, too, when you only have one or two accusers and their allegations go back several decades.
Yeah.
And actually, in this case, you have about like 50 NBC employees, all of them female, signing on and backing Tom Brokaw's credibility.
Yep.
Those names include Rachel Maddow, Mika Brzezinski. So they're not jumping ship right away.
Yes.
And we'll see how the story progresses. I mean, oftentimes with these Me Too stories, there'll be like one or two accusers early on, and then the weeks go by and it becomes evident that, yes, this person actually did assault or harass these women.
And then, of course, all of the defenders of Tom Brokaw, if that were to happen, would slowly remove their letters of support from the internet to the extent that they can and say, this was based on my personal knowledge with Tom Brokaw. Of course, I had no idea what else was going on, and clearly we must trust the accusers in this case. My other degree of interest in general with the Me Too movement is that I think it would be really useful for everybody to become more familiar, and this is a topic we've covered on the program, with when is sexual harassment a crime. And of course, sexual assault is not sexual harassment. Yes. And we've interviewed an attorney about this. When is it not, but still something that any reasonable human resources department should be concerned with, right? Because I think a lot of times we see there's, of course, stigma with coming forward to say, I was sexually harassed, I was sexually assaulted, I was raped. We've talked about that extensively. But sometimes there's also just a lack of awareness of where the law is and where something is a violation maybe of company policy, but not of the law or whatever. And if people don't know the extent to which what they are suffering at the hands of is either against company policy or against the law, that can also make people not come forward, right? Not just the stigma, but the idea that, as far as I know, nothing can really be done anyway, so I'm going to keep my mouth shut type of thing.
Yeah, assault's a difficult thing too, because it's considered like unwanted contact.
Yes.
So if like an employer or someone higher up in the rankings at a company decides to like tap an employee on the shoulder or a coworker on the shoulder, is that considered assault if they didn't want that contact?
Sure.
I don't think anyone would interpret it as such, but by the letter of the law, it could be interpreted as such.
It could, but I actually think that, as interesting as that is, to focus on that is a problem in the sense that there are those who want to delegitimize as an umbrella thing all claims of sexual assault, who will focus on cases like that. But of course, those are the edge cases.
Oh, yeah.
Most cases are pretty cut and dry. So I think that is definitely an issue. I think it's a great issue for the bonus show among sort of our supporting audience. I think when that becomes the focus of the broader discourse, we've seen it become problematic. Sticking sort of with this topic, Charlie Rose lost his job on PBS as well as on CBS as one of the morning anchors of whatever their morning show is. CBS early, daily. I never know which is which is daily, which is today, which is
morning.
This morning, whatever. But this is just so crazy. According to Page 6, there's a pitch going around for a program that would be hosted by Charlie Rose, where he would interview other prominent men who lost their jobs after being accused of sexual misconduct, including possibly people like Matt Lauer and Louis C.K. I don't have a problem in principle with a program that will be sort of a program of atonement to recognize and attempt to right wrongs that have been done and to educate people, blah, 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 blah. But something about this, particularly because as far as I know, Charlie Rose wouldn't be doing this for free. This would be a show that he's going to be getting paid for. It's a way for corporate media to rehab the image of someone like Charlie Rose by paying him presumably a lot of money. Now, I've not seen what the financial proposal is.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that he would be paid for hosting this program.
You'd hope some of it would go to charity, right?
Right. I guess so. Yeah. But this is like when, after Bill Cosby, remember when there was the mistrial in the Bill Cosby case, which eventually was retried and led to a guilty verdict, as we talked about on the program today. When there was that mistrial, Bill Cosby, it was announced, although I think it ended up not happening, that a vindicated Bill Cosby was going to tour the country warning young men about how to avoid being incorrectly accused of sexual assault, right? Like a completely insane thing, because a mistrial, of course, doesn't undo 60 allegations against Bill Cosby or whatever. This doesn't seem like exactly the same thing, but it seems to me like a disastrous idea. And it's basically corporate media putting together money and a show to rehab the image of people like Charlie Rose and Matt Lauer and Louis C.K. Why is that the responsibility of corporate media? I don't
feel
get
like
it.
It's too soon, too. I mean, these allegations surfaced against these men
Months
less than
ago.
a year ago.
Yeah.
Just months ago. And usually when you have someone who's in the public spotlight and has been disgraced, they'll just disappear for a while.
Yeah.
Like, George W. Bush, of course, he hasn't been accused of any sexual misconduct.
No, but war crimes.
he did start the Iraq War, and the economy crashed under him.
Yeah.
And under Obama's presidency, he decided to just stay home and paint for a while.
Yep.
And now, in the era of Trump, he's resurfaced, and everyone seems to like him again for some reason.
Right. Part of it, I
think that these guys would do that too.
With Bush, I think part of it is that we just get distance from the atrocities committed policy-wise, and now he's just kind of like a close to 70-year-old guy who's seems kind of
71?
nice, and we remember his face or something like that. He's 71. Okay.
Yeah, I looked that up.
And he's hanging out with Ellen DeGeneres and talks about how great his daughter's friendship with Ellen is and all this stuff. Part of it also is just Trump, right? Compared to Trump, he seems like a reasonable guy. I think it is too soon, and I think that this is don't hire Charlie Rose to host a show about sexual harassment, right? Just at face value, it's absolutely ridiculous. I mentioned, I think last week, that after that horribly tragic Southwest Airlines flight where a number of passengers were injured and one woman died when there was an uncontained engine failure, I mentioned that most airlines have plans in place for when something like this happens. Immediately, the Southwest Airlines website changed to a message of condolence. They flew out their PR crisis management specialists, I think, to Philadelphia Airport, which was where the Southwest flight made an emergency landing after the engine failure. And I mentioned that there are airline attorneys who specialize in helping people who are in these circumstances sue airlines, and that airlines, for the most part, choose to settle, not to publicly be seen as legally fighting aggressively the victims of an air disaster, accident, or incident. And we're already seeing that start to happen, because a passenger from the Southwest Airlines flight, Lilia Chavez, who is a California native and was on that flight, she now is suing Southwest Airlines, and it is probably only the first in many, many lawsuits. And the lawsuit is, as expected, alleging that this has caused post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and other personal injury. Nothing at all surprising about this. And there are conversations as to whether this is a system that is set up to basically encourage, quote, frivolous lawsuits, right? The idea that airlines know that when this happens, they're going to get sued. They set aside money. They already kind of calculate it in their budgets, and they know that every once in a while we will have to settle with someone in order to not create more negative PR. And I don't think it's frivolous in the sense that I know people who have suffered far smaller incidents on planes, like just a terrible turbulent incident where the air masks come down and you don't know what's going on, right? And who have never flown again. Now, I like to think that if that happened to me, I would continue flying, right? Because travel is important to me, and I do have places I go for work, and even just to see my family, I've got to fly to Argentina or wherever it is that they live. But I don't know how it is that would impact me, right? And it does stand to reason that it is completely legitimate that if you are involved in an incident like this, where someone is partially sucked out of a plane you're on, even if you're not physically injured, that as a result of a problem with an engine would have a huge impact on your psychological state and cause post-traumatic stress. So I don't in any way think that there isn't legitimacy to these claims. I am not the person to say what it is that these individuals are entitled to, but these claims don't strike me as frivolous.
Yeah, it's a little bit questionable, I think.
You do think so?
Well, I guess when you decide to fly on a plane, you're accepting a good amount of risk.
Okay.
And because it's a very unnatural thing that we're doing after all. So I don't know if the liability is entirely on the airline when something goes wrong. I think that's just kind of built into it. Obviously, I mean, you'd have to look at the ticket that you bought and the contract that you're signing off on when you go through with such a thing. But I also don't know if she's the right person to bring the case forward. Obviously, the people suffering the most are the loved ones of the victim. So if there is a case to be made here against Southwest, I think it's those people first and foremost.
Well, they will be getting a much bigger settlement, I can assure you, probably for wrongful death. And I don't know that these are just sort of the implicit risks of, I mean, listen, if you get on a bus, right, to take a bus instead of a plane, because driving in a bus, you talk about the unnatural aspect of getting in a metal tube and flying through the air at 500 miles an hour, but it is just physics in the end. If you get on a bus and the bus flips because of maintenance that was deferred by the bus company, would you be saying, listen, it's dangerous to drive around on the highways, there's accidents all the time, so I don't know that it's really logical to sue the company? No, there was maintenance that was deferred there. With Southwest Airlines, there was a similar incident with an engine 2 years ago. The FAA wanted to have all of those engines inspected within 12 months. That was considered unreasonable because of the number of planes that it would take out of service and the number of cancellations that it would result to. So a longer term for the inspection of those engines and repair as needed was put in place. And hey, you know what? If the 12-month program for inspection had been actually carried out, it's possible this incident wouldn't have happened. So I don't know that it's just, hey, it's the risks of flying.
I think if there are like particular things that you could point to, like the fact that these engines should have been inspected and the airline did go wrong somewhere, I understand there is a case to be made.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. It's just like it's a story that has affected a lot of people on that plane.
Right.
And maybe they should pool their efforts together rather than just like one person looking for the payout.
That may end up happening. I mean, sometimes they will be represented as a class and there will be sort of a settlement matrix, but that gets more into the specifics of it. And I think that it's not as cut and dry. I mean, listen, the agreement was they're not doing the 12-month inspection period. So given that, Southwest didn't necessarily do anything wrong, but certainly there was awareness of the problem with these engines, and there was lobbying by Southwest not to fix it as quickly. They didn't go against any agreement. So it's very complex, and ultimately it's going to be a judge or jury that ends up deciding what happens here. Send me your thoughts. Send me your thoughts in general about these aviation lawsuits. Send me your thoughts about whether you are flying less or considering not flying. I know that Southwest bookings have been down since this news, although statistically it's probably a pretty safe time to fly Southwest, because now you'd better be damn sure that it's more likely that the engine has been looked at before your flight takes off than before.
I think this was also the first commercial airline death since 2009.
The Buffalo flight,
That's a pretty good streak. And,
was it 09?
Despite this calamity, only one person died. It could have been a lot worse. Yeah, that's
think,
what I heard.
I know that it was that Buffalo, that regional airlines flight to Buffalo, but I don't remember the year. But yeah, it's been about 10 years. Send me your thoughts. Back tomorrow with a new show and bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.